You're very welcome to this episode of the podcast, and we really mean it. We're pretty sure we'll be able to explain quite a few things fairly well to you. You'll learn about the words really, very, quite, pretty, and fairly, so that you can use these intensifiers correctly in English. Welcome to
Aprender Inglés con Reza y Craig.
Hi, I'm Reza.
And my name's Craig.
And with nearly 50 years of teaching between us, we'll help you improve your English and take it to the next level. How are you doing, Craig?
I'm doing very well, thank you. I'm going to take a sigh of relief. A sigh is because we're nearly in the summer holidays over here in Spain, so I can see a few weeks of relaxing coming our way very soon. But I think you have some good news for us, Reza, about a recent exam.
Yes, I must say I'm pretty pleased with myself because against all the odds, that means I didn't expect it, against all the odds, I passed my B2 Valencian exam, Valencian language, and my C2, ooh, that's proficiency, eh? My C2 Spanish exam. The Spanish exam was really hard. Wow. Now, please don't be offended, anybody. This is just an observation. It's not a criticism. The listening was so difficult because there was lots of Andaluces. And I love Andalusia. But you know what? You guys can be hard to understand.
Yeah.
In a listening test, we had 5 Gaditanos in the listening. That's people from Cadiz. That is a difficult accent to understand if you don't know it well.
And it was a comedy show, wasn't it?
It wasn't a comedy show, no, but it was a TV show, but they were telling jokes and things, not exactly a comedy show. There was another listening which was a comic, but it was Bertino Osborne, a very famous Andalusian presenter, and he was interviewing loads of Andaluces, and as Spanish people know, perhaps people from South America don't know, but many people consider the accent from Cadiz to be the hardest to understand. It's a very nice accent. I really like it, but it is difficult if you're not familiar with it. Wow, that was a hard listening.
Well, I must say congratulations, and also on behalf of all the listeners, especially people who have been listening a long time, congratulations, Reza, on behalf of everyone on C2 and on B2 for Valenciano. Fantastic. Well done.
Gracias.
What's first this week?
Well, first of all, we've got a message from Cordoba, but it's not Andalusia. It's Cordoba in Argentina, and it's an email from Pablo Borioli.
Would you like to read it for us?
Okay. Pablo asked the question, is it possible to find in your website, inglespodcast.com, an index of all the podcasts you've done to see all the different topics available? Good question. It's a good idea, Pablo, but I'm afraid we doubt we'll have the time to make the list and keep it updated. So it would be nice. I agree with you there. But as regards time, Craig, I don't know if we'll be able to do it.
Yeah, unfortunately, because of our other commitments, we're not going to have the time to do that. We did think about doing it, but we decided at the moment, no. But if you want to do it, then fantastic. Send us a list and I'll put it on the website. The only thing is, it has to be updated. So that means going back not only the 372 episodes that we've done and looking at all the show notes and including all the topics we've spoken about, because not all of the topics are always in the title of the episode. That's the problem. And then every week there's new content. So it's another thing to do to update constantly a list. And if you don't know, on the website there is a search box. So if you're particularly interested in medical vocabulary or legal vocabulary or the present perfect, any aspect of vocabulary, grammar, pronunciation, you can search on the website, and there's a very good chance we've spoken about it. But please do remember that it will only appear in the search results if your search term or your search words match the name of the episode, the title of the episode.
We've got another bit of feedback now, but this time it's a voice message, and it's from Pedro from Burgos in Spain.
Hello, Reza and Craig. It's Pedro from Spain again. Let me be a bit more specific this time. I'm from a town in the province of Burgos. And the last time I told you I was using English for remote working with, foreign companies. And you asked me how my experience with that has been. First of all, I have to say that I didn't start working remotely because of the pandemic. I had already started working remotely on January 2019 because I found some opportunities of doing the kind of software development I liked the most if I worked for foreign companies. So that's what I'm doing, and I'm loving it. Since I'm also a contractor, I have the freedom of working not every day the same amount of hours, and that's cool. But that also comes with a downside, that you are working from home, so your home is your workplace as well, and that sometimes can be a bit like too much, if you know what I mean. Lastly, I've just become a Patreon supporter. Keep it up.
Yes, I do know what you mean, Pedro, because I've spoken to many people who have had to make the change from working in an office and going to a physical workspace to working at home with the children and making an office in their kitchen and homeschooling and everything that goes with that. So I totally understand what you mean, but there are advantages, aren't there, Reza?
That's true. Like you, like Craig, because of the lockdown, my house became my classroom. I had to do many classes online. I had never done that before, but there are advantages. For example, if you have a class at 9 o'clock in the morning, you could wake up at 8:30?
Or 5 to 9.
8:45, 5 to 9, and not be late for your class. But if you've got to go to an academy, a center, obviously you're going to have to get up a lot earlier than that. So you can save a lot of time by not having to commute. That's to travel back and forward from work. Yeah. So that's one good side. But yeah, I really get what you're saying about it becoming a bit tedious having to work and live in the same place. You get a bit tired of looking at the same four walls. Yeah, that's true. Wouldn't you agree, Craig?
Yeah, and I remember we had this conversation at the beginning of the pandemic when we had no experience of teaching online, and you said that you would prefer, if you had the choice, to go into the academy and teach face-to-face. Do you still feel that way, or has the experience changed your opinion?
On the whole, yes, apart from early morning classes. Early morning classes, I think I prefer to do them. I've had a few which have started at 8:30 in the morning. I think I prefer them at home. But any kind of later classes, yeah, because you're going to be up and about anyway.
Yeah. One or two points about your message, Pedro, which I thought was very, very good. I particularly liked your use of verb tenses. For example, you said, I had already started working remotely, past perfect, because I found some opportunities, past simple. I really like the way you mix those two tenses to show the difference in times, because you had started working before you found the opportunities. So excellent. And also, it comes with a downside was a lovely expression. Any comments on the message, Reza?
It was a very good message, but as you say, there always is a downside, and I could find one or two little things to correct. I think you said, Pedro, on January 2019, but because it's a month, we have to say in. So in January 2019 is the preposition. Your pronunciation was really, really good, except perhaps one word, the word foreign. It may just have been the audio quality, I'm not sure, but it sounded like you were pronouncing the G in that word, Foreign, but you shouldn't pronounce the G. So it's foreign.
And thank you very much for becoming a Patreon sponsor. And you'll hear your name at the end of the show, along with other new sponsors of the podcast. Next, we have a voice message from Danielle from Colombia.
Hi Craig, hi Razam, how are you going? I hope you're going well. And Daniel from Colombia, the land of coffee. I'm very, very thankful with you. Your podcasts have been an amazing tool for trying to improve my English every day. I've been listening it for 2 years so far, and I want to tell you that I'm tempted to take an IELTS exam next year. So I'm trying hard to study a bit every day. And something that I would like to know is the difference between words like so, to, very, quite, such, enough, and yeah, when do I need to use one another? Sometimes it's very confused. Thanks for your helping. Bye bye.
Thank you very much, Danielle, and for your message, and also for giving us the idea for the focus of this podcast. Any comments, Reza?
Thanks very much, Danielle. And your message was very clear. However, there's a few little things we'd like to correct to help you. I think you said, I'm tempted to taking the IELTS exam, the IELTS exam. For those of you who don't know, that's the International English Language Testing System. But it's not tempted to plus ing. You said taking. No, it's infinitive. So you should say, I'm tempted to take the IELTS exam. To take.
And be careful, Danielle, with the difference between confusing and confused, the active adjective and the passive adjective. If something is confusing, that's the active, then you are confused. That's the passive. So you are confused by something. If something's exciting, you are excited. If something's boring, you are bored. So that's the ing, ed adjectives. Be careful of those. And also, at the end you said, thanks for your helping. You need the noun, help. Thanks for your help. Or you could use the verb as a gerund. Thanks for helping me. So after prepositions, we need the gerund, help, helping. Thanks for helping me. And you're very, very welcome.
You mentioned a few words which confuse you. You mentioned so, to, very, quite, such, and enough. Well, in fact, Danielle, we've already done an episode about to and enough. That was episode 122. It was called To, Enough, and Religion Vocabulary. So if you go to English Podcast /122, you'll find that information.
Yeah, it's probably more effective to put the words you mentioned in groups and study them separately. So study to and enough together, find out the differences between those when you use them. And also so and such, you can look at as a pair of words, and their use has rules. And to know exactly when to use so and when to use such, listen to episode 45. So that's inglespodcast.com/45 for so and such.
But we are going to talk about at least one of the words you mentioned, which is quite. But we're going to group other words which have a more logical connection with quite. We're going to talk about the intensifiers, words which intensify the meaning of another word. The intensifiers, really, very, quite, pretty, and fairly. Craig, what can you tell the listeners about these words? What are they?
Well, they're fairly difficult to understand. They're quite difficult. Actually, no, we'll explain everything. They are adverbs. And these adverbs that Reza said, they're often used in front of adjectives and adverbs. But they're not used to modify verbs, which is what you probably are used to understanding that adverbs do. So they're not used to modify verbs in this case. Usually, but not always, they make the adjectives and adverbs more powerful. And that's why we call them intensifiers, because they make the adjectives and adverbs more intense. So let's start by looking at very and really. And they are strong intensifiers. Can you think of an example, Reza?
Well, although it sounds a little bit big-headed, what about this?
What's big-headed?
Big-headed means that you have a lot of confidence in yourself, or it sounds like you're trying to convince everybody that you're really good. I say this just as an example, as for fun. Reza and Craig are very good teachers, people say. Or you could also say Reza and Craig are really good teachers. So it doesn't really matter if we use very or really before the word good. They mean pretty much the same.
What's interesting about that example was that Reza and I do the notes for these podcasts on a Google document, and so that we both can edit the Google document in real time. And I wrote, Reza is a really good teacher. Reza is a very good teacher. Then he edited the document to say Craig is a really good teacher. So then I edited it again to make it Reza and Craig are really or very good teachers. And I think that Reza is really modest.
And I think Craig is a very good teacher. He's better than just good. So when we use very or really plus good, we don't mean just good. We mean better than good, more intense than good, better than good.
And if you're a Spanish speaker, that will be muy or muy. Yes. Let's think of another example connected to the weather, because at the moment we are approaching the middle of the Spanish summer and it's really hot, or I could say very hot, which means more than a little, more than a bit hot.
Danielle speaks English really well. Or we could also say Danielle speaks English very well. So better than just well, he's incredible. He speaks really or very well. So again, the word really or very is intensifying the meaning of well.
So I hope with those examples we've clarified how these adverbs can be used in front of adjectives and adverbs. So let's move on from fairly simple examples to using quite, which behaves in a very similar way, but it's a little bit more complicated because it can have two different meanings, can't it, Reza?
Yeah, for me, definitely quite is the trickiest. It's the most complicated of all these words we're going to talk about today, because it can mean one thing or quite the opposite. It's often used humorously, sarcastically. It's a word you have to be careful with. Would you agree?
Yeah, and it also has slightly different meanings in some cases in American English. So let's break it down, which means let's look slowly and individually at different uses of quite. Are you ready, Reza?
I'm not quite ready. Can you wait for a few minutes?
You're not quite ready, so you're almost ready.
I'm almost ready. I'm not completely ready. Just give me a few minutes. I'm not quite ready.
Okay, I'll wait.
So there, I put the word quite, the adverb quite, before the adjective ready to mean almost ready, almost casi. Yeah, but not completely. Just give me a bit more time and I'll be ready. I'm not quite ready.
Imagine there's some food in the oven, or there's a cake in the oven, and Reza says, is the cake ready yet? I could say, well, it's not quite done. It's not quite ready to take out. And you can add the word yet, can't you? You can say it's not quite ready yet, or it's not quite done yet.
And if I asked you, Craig, well, I'm afraid you won't be able to have your chocolate cake at the moment. Are you prepared to wait?
Not really.
Good use of really.
Yes, no, I'm quite happy to wait. So is that the same meaning? I'm quite happy to wait?
No, here it's different. If he says sure, like in a positive way, I'm quite happy to wait, he means I'm very happy. I am completely happy. So can you see that in the first example, I'm not quite ready. Can you wait for a few minutes? It meant not completely. But if I ask Craig if he can wait a few minutes before he has his cake, and he says, sure, I'm quite happy to wait, it means the opposite. It means he's completely happy. So it actually has the complete opposite meaning here compared to the previous example. It's a tricky word.
It is tricky. It is tricky. Let's think of another example. Reza, do you enjoy checking your students' writing homework? I think you do. I think you enjoy checking the writing, don't you?
Checking the writing. That's not quite true.
Not quite true. It's a bit true.
It's not completely true. I enjoy helping students, but I must be honest, writing correction, as any teacher would tell you, is not the most enjoyable aspect of the job, that's for sure. It has to be done and it's useful, and I enjoy helping the students. But I must admit, if I had to do 6 hours of correction every day of my life for the rest of my life, yeah, I wouldn't be too pleased about that. So it's not quite true that I love correcting writing.
And I quite agree with you. So if I say I quite agree with you, that means, yeah, I absolutely agree with you. Podcasting's a waste of time, Reza. We don't earn much money. It's lots of work. I don't know. I think it's a waste of time.
Craig, I don't quite see it that way. It's true there's no money in it. We're not going to get rich. In fact, there's basically no money at all. But I don't quite see it that way. It's not completely true, because think of all the people we help. Think of our listeners. Think of the lovely feedback we get. Think of the compliments, the praise, the nice things people say about us. I get a lot of satisfaction from that. So I don't quite see it in such a negative way.
So when you're using quite in that example, I don't quite see it that way. I don't quite agree with you. It's a way of disagreeing with someone up to a point, correct?
Exactly. So I'm saying that what you say may be partly true, but it's not completely true. So I don't quite see it that way. It's a nice, polite way of disagreeing, as Craig has just said.
Reza, one thing my mum used to say to me when I was a child was, Craig, that's quite enough of that. Or, that's quite enough of that, young man. What do you think she meant by that?
Well, there, the word quite, it doesn't really have a specific translation into any language, but it just means stop doing that or stop saying that. The word quite here adds a certain annoyance,
yes,
and irritation. So that's quite enough of that sounds harder than just saying that's enough of that. If you add quite, that's quite enough of that. You're saying, look, I'm really annoyed now. You stop right now.
So it's intensifying the annoyance. Yeah.
Craig, what if I said to you that I'm afraid I only have one type of chocolate biscuit to offer you? Normally I have 2 or 3, but we've run out and I'm afraid I can only offer you one type of chocolate biscuit today.
That's quite all right. No problem. Don't worry. That's quite all right. So that's quite all right is quite a formal expression, and it means it's okay, don't worry, relax, it's no problem. That's quite all right. I don't mind.
By the way, that was just an example. When I come to Craig's house, there's normally at least 2 or 3 types of chocolate biscuits on offer. Craig does not like to run out of chocolate biscuit choices, believe you me.
But what you don't know is that before you arrived, there were 5 or 6 varieties of chocolate biscuits. And the selection has been reduced. Another example with it's quite all right. Imagine you're on a bus or on a train and there's a small child who is disturbing you. So the mother or the father, the mum or dad might say to you, hey, I'm sorry if my child is disturbing you. I apologize if my son or my daughter is bothering you. Then you would answer, that's quite all right. It's no problem. It's fine. That's quite all right. there can be a small difference in use between British and American English with the word quite. For example, usually in American English, if you say something is quite good, it means it's very good. It's very good. It's really good. Whereas in British English, with slightly different intonation that we'll look at in a minute, you could say that something's quite good, which means it's not bad, but it could be better. It's not bad, but it's not as good as it could be. Let me give you an example. If you're speaking in American English and you say, these cookies are quite good, that means they're very good. What about an English example, Reza, that's similar?
Well, in British English, first of all, we would change the word cookies to biscuits, although it's the same thing, galletas. And we would say, these biscuits are quite good. And that could mean, yeah, they're not bad, they're good, but they're not as good as they could be. I mean, if we thought that they were really, really good, we would say, these biscuits are excellent, or these biscuits are fantastic.
Or really good or very good.
Or really good. But the very fact that we've said quite good does mean that, yeah, maybe they're good, but they're not absolutely the maximum they could be, is understood in British English. Whereas, as Craig said, if an American said, these cookies are quite good, he's definitely saying they're very good.
And looking at stress and intonation, it can affect the meaning of quite a lot, can't it, Reza? Let's look at one example, thinking of a new Disney film, for example. Reza, did you enjoy the new Disney film last week?
Yes, it was quite good. Now, what I mean when I say that?
That means that it was better than you expected, surprisingly good. And you stressed good, didn't you? You said it was quite good. So the stress was on good in that sentence.
Shall we repeat it?
Yeah. Did you enjoy the Disney film last week?
Yes, it was quite good.
However, listen to this example. Did you enjoy the new Disney film last week?
Yes, it was quite good.
See, that there Reza stressed quite. So that means it's not as good as he'd expected. It wasn't fantastic. It wasn't as good as he expected. Stressing quite. Listen one more time. Reza, did you enjoy the new Disney film?
Yes, it was quite good.
Remember, if you'd like to see these examples and read a little about the grammar we're speaking about in this episode, go to inglespodcast.com/372 for this episode. Let's move on to look at two more words that we can use as intensifiers, and they are pretty and fairly. Now, pretty is quite common to use as a positive adjective to describe someone, isn't it? You'd say she's a pretty girl, or that's a very pretty shirt you're wearing. But it's not the same here.
It's not the same. It's exactly as you said, an adjective. She could be a nice woman, an intelligent woman, or a pretty woman. So all of those words, nice, intelligent, good, pretty, are adjectives. But we are talking about the word pretty as an intensifier. And intensifiers are adverbs. Here's an example sentence. It's pretty expensive, but I'm still going to buy it. So when I say pretty expensive, I don't mean bonita, guapita. I don't mean that. Not a pretty woman. I mean it's bastante caro. It's pretty expensive. It's quite expensive. Or más bien caro. So, okay, maybe it's not the most expensive thing in the world, but it certainly is not cheap. It's pretty expensive.
And there's one important difference to notice when you use quite and pretty, that if there's an article, you need to be careful about where you say or write those two words, quite and pretty. So quite goes before the article. For example, it's quite an expensive phone, and pretty goes after the article. It's a pretty expensive phone. Be careful of the position of those two words.
The word fairly is similar to pretty in meaning. Here's an example. I didn't get top marks in the exam. It's true. I just about passed my B2
But you
Valencian.
passed. But you passed.
Yeah. In fact, I'll tell you, it's 65% to pass, and I got 67 in my B2 Valencia. So I didn't get top marks in the exam, but my results were fairly good. They're fairly good. They were reasonable. They were acceptable. I got a really high mark in my reading. Not such a high mark in my speaking, but hey, acceptable, reasonable. So I didn't get top marks in the exam, but my results were fairly good. They're acceptable. Hey, I passed. That's acceptable.
Very acceptable.
Another thing to mention about fairly is, like the word pretty, if you've got an article, the word a or an, it also goes after the article. Here's an example of the word fairly with an article. It's a fairly cheap restaurant. So I'm putting the word fairly after a. It's a fairly cheap restaurant. I could also say it's a pretty cheap restaurant. But remember, quite goes before the article. So if I used quite, I would have to say it's quite a cheap restaurant. So be careful with the position of those words with articles a or an.
Well, we hope you've quite enjoyed this episode on a little bit of grammar and intensifiers, and that you can now use really, very, quite, pretty and fairly with confidence. And now it's your turn to practice your English. Why don't you send us a voice message? We'd love to hear from you. You can leave your messages on SpeakPipe. Go to speakpipe.com/Ingles podcast. What about emails, Reza?
If you prefer to write, you could send us an email. Send one to Craig. He's at craig@inglespodcast.com, or to me, Reza, belfastreza@gmail.com.
And if you're interested in buying a course to improve your English, you can find courses on our website at store.mansioningles.net.
As ever, we'd like to thank all of you who donate money to us through the Patreon scheme. That's Patreon. And the people who do that donate a minimum of $1.20 per month. The 20 cents is to cover the tax, the VAT, the VAT. And by doing that, they get instant access to recent audio transcriptions. If you'd be interested in that, you could find out by following the link that we've put in the show notes to www.patreon.com/Ingles podcast.
And we'd like to say hello to our latest Patreon supporters who have joined us this month. They are Javier Lopage, and I apologise if that's not quite how you pronounce your surname, Javier. I did try. David Santana Rubiales, Liliana Galucci, and Pedro J. Estebanez. And special thanks to Liliana and Pedro, who have donated more than the minimum $1. Thank you very much, and thank you to all of our Patreon supporters who continue to help us with the transcriptions for this podcast. What's next week, Reza?
On next week's episode, we've got 8 more common colloquial expressions.
So a part 2 to the one we did last week. If you enjoyed this podcast, please tell your friends so that more people can listen to us. And until next time, have a wonderful week. Thank you for listening to us today. It's goodbye from me.
And it's bye-bye from me.
The music in this podcast is by Pitts. The track is called See You Later.